Okay, you're live.
Okay, welcome everybody to the general meeting of the Hyperledger Climate Action Accounting Special Interest Group on March 22. Today we have a special guest presenting to us, John from Toucan. But before we jump into his presentation, we will give new members the chance for introductions. Lars, as I saw that you joined the call, do you want to go first?
Sure, happy to do so. So my name is Lars Kvale. I joined Chia Network recently. Before that, I've been involved in the carbon sustainability renewable energy world for about 15 to 20 years. That includes creating some of the standards that we're familiar with, as well as running the environmental division for the company APX that built most of the electronic registries for the various carbon programs and REC programs, as well as developing carbon projects, ESG strategy, and so forth. So relatively familiar with greenhouse gas accounting, all of those things, relatively new to the blockchain world.
Oh, sounds amazing. Thanks for joining, Lars.
Absolutely.
Is there anyone else new to this call? If not, I want to mention that this is a Hyperledger call, so the antitrust policy notice is in effect, as well as the Hyperledger code of conduct. Please read through them if you haven't already and follow them. So John leads the ecosystem development in Toucan, and Toucan provides an open infrastructure for carbon markets running on public blockchains to finance the highest impact climate projects. His other work is focused on the application of spatial data technologies with consensus economy and connecting dots in a community, building a brighter future for humanity. Since Toucan launched in October 21, they have already bridged 18 million tons of CO2, which accounts for roughly 5% of the Vera registry. John, thank you so much for making the time today. And I'm very much looking forward to your presentation. The stage is yours. I stop sharing, and then you can go ahead and share your presentation with us.
Great. Thank you so much, Robin. Thanks, everyone, for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, which I think should be here. Can everyone see this building for Regenerative Future? Great. Okay, great. Well, thank you again so much for having me. My name is John. I go by John X across the cryptoverse. My real last name is John Hoops, but you know, it's crypto, it's Web3. I'm here today to talk a little bit about how we're approaching building for a regenerative future at Toucan Protocol. Toucan is a project I've been involved with since last May before launch, and we are building infrastructure, digital infrastructure to scale the world's carbon markets in a very high integrity way. So I'm going to talk a bit through the context of what regenerative economy, regenerative finance is, and then dive a bit into the specifics of the Toucan Protocol, which is really mainly setting up for this bigger kind of question and sort of pulling back the curtain on what we see as the opportunity and the responsibility we have here to redesign the way our financial system works to serve the earth. This is a very casual thing. I'm absolutely open to people cutting in, asking clarifying questions, contributing. You know, I'd much rather have this be an open conversation. The first 20 minutes, I do have some slides prepared, but don't feel like we need to stick to them. And then the second half of the chat, we can get together and yeah, have a bit of a broader conversation. And I'd really especially love, I'm not quite as familiar with the enterprise blockchain world. I've done some work with enterprise blockchain technologies in the past, but have been pretty focused on public blockchains for the last few years. So I'd be really keen, especially to get all of your perspective on the applications of some of these ideas in the Hyperledger world. So let's go ahead and move forward into the talk, and then we'll have a chat later on. Cool. All right. So at Toucan, we build tools to bridge carbon markets onto public blockchains. And there's quite a kind of long-winded explanation for why we do this and why we feel like it matters, which I'll take the next 10 minutes to go through. But the essence of what we're trying to do is create the capability to embed climate action into the fabric of our financial system. So this entails giving others the tools to build applications that benefit, that include this sort of planet positive action in this as a sort of default. And I'll explain a bit what I mean. But Toucan specifically is an infrastructure provider. So we do not buy carbon credits, we do not sell carbon credits. We create the infrastructure that's required to tokenize those carbon credits and bridge them onto a blockchain. And then once they're on a blockchain, connect them to the broader world of decentralized finance. The essence of this is to borrow a phrase from Kate Raworth, who the author of Donut Economics, is to create a system that is regenerative by design. That's what we're thinking through very carefully as we go about the process of designing this infrastructure. So what does it mean to be regenerative? There are a couple of different categories of resource consumption, which are illustrated by these little graphs. You can imagine this is the x-axis is time, and the y-axis on each of these charts is the amount of resources available in a system. And extractive systems will deplete the resource over time. Sustainable keeps it about even. Resilience able to respond to shocks or to disturbances, but a regenerative system is one where the resource is more than sustained, where it is actually regenerated over time. And I personally feel that these regenerative systems are probably what we should be aiming for, because sustainable it's tricky to hit something where it's sustainable and kind of maintains its balance when you can't necessarily foresee these black swan events or unexpected kind of environmental changes or changes in the dynamics of the system. So we want to be aiming for one where we're regenerating and building capacity over time, resilient with resilience to shocks. This is from a graphic by Stephen McKee on Twitter. Kevin Owaki shared this image. So then the question becomes, what do we regenerate? And I personally hold the belief that regeneration is a multi-dimensional endeavor, that we can't be too narrowly fixated on one particular metric, and that even by kind of putting a metric on it, we run the risk of optimizing for the metric rather than for the actual health of the species and health of the earth. But it does help to obviously draw boundaries, and it does help to identify certain categories. This work is the outcome of a couple of exercises we've done in the Kernel Fellowship with their Regeneration Guild, which I've been co-leading over the last few years. And we got this amazing group of people together to just brainstorm all the different things we thought we should regenerate. And surprisingly, or maybe not, the number one category was the self, ourselves. So these were kind of distilled into these five categories. We see community, earth, interspecies, individual, and organizations. I don't think this is a comprehensive list. I don't think there is a correct list, but this points to the fact that there are many different things that we need to be thinking about regenerating. And ideally, we optimize our system so that it's regenerating all of them based on our collective value sets. So what does this actually mean in terms of what we might measure? Sure, atmospheric greenhouse gas concentrations, next level being something like biodiversity, but also things like issues of equity and justice and gender equity, racial equality, health, measures of health, individual health, collective health, community health, organizational health, mental health, our institutions and governance systems. I could argue we should be regenerating the state of our public discourse. Now, obviously, a lot of this is kind of thinking in quite a high and abstract level. And I think this is where we should be aiming with regenerative finance. Where we are now is quite a few steps prior to that. And we're going to get into the second, because that's Toucan's taking quite a pragmatic view on where we start. But the overarching insight is that if we exhaust any one of these dimensions, then our systems will eventually reach a breaking point, and some kind of tipping point will be reached where some shift happens. And often, unfortunately, those shifts cause a lot of harm and damage as the system transitions to find a new stable state. And I think our job right now is to be thinking about the transition point that we're in, how to manage the harm that happens as we transition our economy and our world to this new regenerative society, and then thinking very hard about what are the systems that are catching us as a species and as a global sentient species as we kind of complete this transition. So where do we start? With all that sort of framing of this high level, we should be regenerating our mental health. Where do we actually start? I will say that those prior slides, that was about regenerative finance more broadly. Toucan is taking quite a pragmatic and narrow view on this at the moment, with the overarching vision of helping build this regenerative financial system. But what Toucan is it's fundamentally infrastructure to bridge the voluntary carbon market onto public blockchains. And there are a couple of pieces of this infrastructure which I want to walk through. And I'm really keen to get your feedback, because I know we have some people who have very deep knowledge of carbon markets in the room. I know we have people who have very deep knowledge of blockchains and tokenized asset tokenization systems. So this is our approach. I think personally very much that ideas strengthen under scrutiny, and the hard questions are the best questions. So don't hold back there. But the essence of this is we've got a couple of components of the protocol. The first is the Toucan Carbon Bridge. We also have what we call the Toucan Meta Registry and the carbon pools, which I'll go through in a moment. But the whole journey starts with this idea of the carbon bridge. Toucan is infrastructure that slots in kind of right in the center of the existing voluntary carbon market. So it is a way to tokenize real world assets in the form of carbon credits and represent them on a blockchain-based meta registry, or registry that contains credits from many different registries. By bringing them onto the meta registry, we have an interoperable system where carbon credits from different registries can be compared and bundled together with each other. And the third piece is this module that we built called the Toucan Carbon Pools, which serve to gather together liquidity of similar carbon credits and create a liquid fungible token that can be useful across decentralized finance and beyond. But the first step is the Toucan Carbon Bridge. So essentially what the Toucan Carbon Bridge is, it enables a tokenization of verified carbon credits. Currently, the only registry connected to the Toucan Carbon Bridge from the off-chain registry network is the Vera registry. So as a user, you can go to toucan.earth and initialize a bridging process, and then go to the Vera registry and retire the credits, a batch of credits in the Vera registry, with a explicit message saying these credits are for tokenization with Toucan, not for climate action, for tokenization with Toucan, and thereby transfer the functionality of the credit along with all of the attributes onto the Toucan meta registry. That transfer event, the bridging event, is then verified and approved. And once it's approved, those credits become carbon tokens, right? So it's a kind of transferring from a carbon credit to a carbon token one-to-one. And these carbon tokens adhere to an open standard, which is called the TCO2 standard. And essentially what that means is this is a standard smart contract representing these tokens that have additional information about the particular carbon project and the carbon vintage. So I think probably most of you know, carbon markets are quite a differentiated asset class, where each carbon credit has information about it, including the project where it was kind of issued from, the year that it was, the climate impact took place, There are certain co-benefits. There's the verification methodology that was followed in order to verify that the climate impact actually took place, and so forth. And all of those form the basis of what gives these credits value. Newer credits tend to be more valuable than older credits. Certain methodologies tend to be more or less valuable than other ones. And the market just kind of, different market actors look for credits from different methodologies based on their needs, from different geographies based on their needs. And the one of the kind of primary innovations of Toucan is that we allowed for the tokenization of these credits with all of their attributes essentially tagged on the smart contract that sort of represents those tokens on the blockchain, and therefore we more or less preserve the complexity of the market as we tokenize these credits. So what we end up is what we call semi-fungible ERC20 tokens with additional functionality, including the ability to retire these carbon tokens. So you can think of this TCO2 token, a carbon token, as the on-chain equivalent to a carbon credit held in the Vera registry. This is nice because we plug into this already well-established and respected verification systems with this network of standards bodies that have scientifically rigorous verification methodologies that they've been developing over the last decades. But we also then bring enhanced utility to the asset class, because as cryptographic tokens, they kind of inherit a lot of properties and functionality and interoperability with decentralized finance applications, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. So first step is this Toucan Carbon Bridge to bridge carbon credits from off-chain onto the Toucan meta registry. This is just a quick screenshot of our the beginning of the bridging process. So it involves going to toucan.earth and opening our app and initializing a new batch. I won't get into the technical details. We can talk a little bit about that later on if you'd like, but essentially there's this procedure for securely bridging this batch from the source registry onto the Toucan meta registry in a way where there's a publicly verifiable one-to-one link between the off-chain version and the on-chain version. That's very important because above all, Toucan is designed to preserve the integrity of the carbon markets. So we need to make sure there's no double issuance, there's no double spending. And a big part of that comes from making sure that this bridging process can't be manipulated. Once they're bridged, these carbon tokens are represented on the Toucan meta registry. This is a essentially smart contract-based system for representing carbon tokens from all of these different projects and vintages. As cryptographic tokens, as ERC20 tokens, these tokens, the carbon tokens have global instant settlement. There are the double spend protections that consensus networks and blockchains afford. Counterparty risk is radically reduced, largely through the use of smart contracts. And also, it's very easy to create an account on the Toucan registry. All you need is a smartphone and to be able to download a mobile application, a wallet app, and you can hold and buy and sell and retire carbon tokens just like that, including in fractionalized units. So you don't even need to own one full carbon token. Often carbon tokens are quite inexpensive, so owning one or many is not a big deal, but there are certain vintages and methodologies that are more expensive, and that fractionalized access is quite exciting. And it's also quite exciting from a retirement's perspective. At the moment, typically what happens in the legacy registry systems is retirements are bundled up on behalf of many end users and performed in one bulk kind of retirement event, usually by hand, often manually. This retirement is done. And with Toucan, fractionalized retirements are now natively possible, and it's quite easy to automate the retirement process. There's sort of like out of the box open API access to the system for writing and also for reading. So that's the last point there, this open data access. We have the ability to query the Toucan meta registry and fetch information about balances or accounts, the portfolio of a particular account, the different holders of a particular project or vintage, et cetera, et cetera. So all together, this means that Toucan has built a better carbon ledger that runs on blockchains, that runs on smart contracts. The third and final component solves a kind of an interesting and unique problem, or somewhat unique problem to carbon markets, which is the challenge of fragmented liquidity. As I mentioned a bit earlier, the voluntary carbon markets, while it's a global unregulated market, it is also a quite a heterogeneous asset class, because one carbon token or carbon credit, excuse me, is not fungible with another. The vintage matters, the year that the climate impact took place, the project matters, the location matters, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what this does is it fragments liquidity and means that it's difficult to find a transparent price for carbon credits of a certain standard. There's no, it's much more difficult to form liquid markets so that it's easy to buy and sell, et cetera. So this is why we built this module of the Toucan Protocol, which is called the carbon pools. So a carbon pool is a smart contract account, and it's an account that can hold carbon tokens. So you can think of it as basically a kind of automated account. When you go to deposit in this account, you would deposit a carbon token in, and if it passes what we call a gating filter, which I'll explain in a second, then automatically another token in the system, which is called a carbon reference token, is created and returned to your wallet. So this gating filter serves to check to make sure that each carbon token that gets deposited has a certain minimum set of attributes or gating criteria it has to possess. And I explained a bit earlier how we tag each credit contract with this sort of standardized attribute taxonomy. That becomes useful here because we have this machine readable attribute taxonomy that can be filtered at the carbon pools layer. And then the outcome of this is you end up with a carbon reference token, which is one single fungible liquid carbon reference token that's unique to that particular carbon pool. So what you end up is you have this carbon pool account that holds a range of different carbon tokens from a number of different projects and vintages, regions, et cetera, that all have a minimum set of attributes. And then for each carbon token held in the pool, you have a corresponding carbon reference token that essentially serves to be a claim or like a coupon that you can redeem for one of the carbon tokens held in the pool. As a liquid fungible token, that's a useful token to be used across the decentralized finance ecosystem. And again, I'll explain a bit what I mean by that in a minute, but to explain a bit more clearly what this means, if you buy one NCT, we have two carbon pools at the moment, the base carbon pool and the nature carbon pool, each of which have carbon reference tokens associated, the base carbon ton and the nature carbon ton. If you buy one NCT token or hold one NCT token, that means you have the right to redeem that token for an underlying carbon token that is from 2012 or greater, and that is based on a nature-based methodology as defined by Vera. So that's a pretty powerful thing because it means that the market can get access to these liquid tokens that are trading on an exchange and can be bought for a transparent price 24/7 anywhere in the world. But they know that they get that underlying token of a kind of benchmark level of quality. I see there's a thing in the chat. I want to say, which wallet can we map to get carbon tokens? Great, I'll explain in a second. Well, any Ethereum compatible wallet can be used to any Ethereum compatible wallet can be used to hold carbon tokens. Carbon tokens can be held in any Ethereum account. And I can explain maybe a bit more about that in a minute, but at the moment, the Toucan Protocol is running on the Polygon blockchain, which is a proof of stake blockchain that kind of serves as a side chain to the Ethereum mainnet. Polygon is very energy efficient and transactions are very inexpensive, which is why we chose two big reasons why we chose Polygon. So in any case, these are the gating criteria for the base carbon ton and the nature carbon ton. BCT, in order to deposit a carbon token into the base carbon pool, it has to be from 2008 or later. It needs to be a VCU from Vera, which is actually the only carbon credits we have bridged onto the system at the moment. And we don't allow HFC 23 credits to be deposited. Actually, we don't allow HFC 23 credits to be bridged into Toucan at this point. The nature carbon ton is a bit more restrictive. It's from 2012 and beyond, and only nature-based methodologies are allowed in the nature carbon pool. So that's the sort of essence of it. These are the two liquid carbon reference tokens that we have on the Toucan protocol. And I kind of go to the lengths to explain this because it's pretty fundamental to the upcoming section where I'm going to talk about what does it mean when we talk about building a regenerative financial system and embedding climate action and weaving it into the fabric of the way our financial system works. But this is sort of the essence of what Toucan has done to date. We have plans for more carbon pools. So you can think of these carbon pools as what the Task Force on Scaling Voluntary Carbon Markets calls the core carbon reference contracts. These sort of standardized attribute sets that it almost serves as like a benchmark product. So we are in discussions and thinking about what the next carbon pools are going to be. And more than that, how do we empower the community and especially the carbon market experts to identify and design what the optimal carbon pools are so that we can make sure that the market gets served, market needs get served, but also that we kind of balance that against getting enough liquidity into these carbon pools for them to be useful and to be able to create liquid markets and so forth. So, right. Moving forward, right. So the essence of this is that carbon markets, the idea is that they help to put a price on polluting the atmosphere. That's one dimension of why carbon markets exist. So it's a market-based mechanism that's intended to incentivize the transition to a green economy. And the way I really think about this is carbon markets are, or carbon credits essentially are a tokenized, well, we don't necessarily say tokenized, but you bundle up the positive climate impact into a financial instrument and then allow anybody else on the market to purchase that. Oftentimes that's to match with some sort of pollution, so to match that positive externality with a negative externality, retire the carbon credit, and therefore kind of balance the carbon budget of a particular organization or individual. But I don't think it necessarily needs to be constrained to just matching with pollution. There are other use cases for carbon credits that don't have anything to do with the pollution of the sort of demand side of the market. And personally, actually, that's something I'm quite excited about. So here is just a little graphic to explain some of the benefits of what Toucan does with a quote from Kate Raworth, who's one of my favorite thinkers in the regenerative economic space. But at the moment, there are a lot of ways in which the carbon markets are fragmented, opaque, difficult to access, bureaucratic, slow. There's a lot of value extraction by middlemen that's ultimately constraining the flow of capital to impact projects on the ground, which is the sort of ostensible purpose of the carbon markets, is to get money into the hands of people who are doing things that are going to improve the ability for humanity to rise to the climate challenge and to stabilize atmospheric concentrations of greenhouse gases. And with this kind of broken system, there is money flowing, obviously, but we want to try to improve the flow of that money so that we can scale up supply and ultimately do more to stabilize the climate. So with Toucan, we remove a lot of these middlemen and replace them with this transparent economic code in the form of smart contracts and create a system that's open to all, that's much easier to access, and that unifies liquidity so that we can have much more efficient, transparent markets running. All right, so all this is great, but what can we build with tokenized carbon credits? What's the purpose here? What does it mean to embed regenerative, embed climate action into the fabric of our economy? This is a quick graphic just to show all of the different use cases and applications we can think of related to Toucan, and there are many more that we can't think of. But there's obviously this idea of offsetting and people purchasing these carbon credits to retire, and that's the sort of most common use case now. But it's also a useful financial instrument and can be used as collateral for loans or stable coins. It can be potentially used to generate yield. It can be used in gaming or some sort of like digital art and collectibles. It can be used in more sophisticated financial applications like derivatives and options systems, and so on and so forth. This is essentially what we want to enable by tokenizing carbon credits and pooling liquidity. We create a new building block for the decentralized finance world that they can automatically incorporate with the rest of what they've been building because it is compatible as a fungible token. Here is a list of just a few of the projects that are building with Toucan Carbon, and this is kind of very early days, and already we have this really amazing range of people that are coming out of the woodwork to build. So we've got people building carbon viewers and explorers that want to make the experience of discovering and buying carbon credits delightful. There's a couple of projects that are looking at backing currencies with carbon credits, so using carbon tokens as collateral for currencies. KlimaDAO is obviously a big one, but KumoDAO is a really exciting one that is progressing nicely. There are automatically integrations that can happen with other decentralized finance projects. Market is a borrowing and lending protocol. Tracer is a derivatives system. SushiSwap is a decentralized exchange, so a currency exchange. So we have both BCT and NCT trading on SushiSwap, and it's among the most liquid carbon markets in the world. Consumer offsetting. This is giving consumers the choice, people the choice to make their climate impact or their blockchain activity carbon neutral just by default by Return Protocol's got this cool system where you essentially buy an NFT and hold it in your account, and all of the transactions from that account are automatically offset. Menthol does it another way. There's already different ways of approaching this. We've got others that are doing really exciting work on thinking about the next generation of environmental assets on blockchains. Regen Network, Moss has been doing great work. They introduced one of the earliest on-chain carbon credits in the world, and are definitely OGs in the space. And there's also work you can do where you can build games or digital collectibles and digital art with carbon. So all this is just pointing at this idea that by tokenizing carbon, we can bring enhanced utility to this. And I think where we want things to head is as the blockchain-based financial system develops and progresses and gains market share, essentially, we want climate action to be built into the infrastructure of the financial applications that we use every day, so that it's not a box that we tick at the end of a form, right? That this is a kind of automatic, inextricable piece of our financial infrastructure. And just by having money, just by holding money, just by using money, we are contributing to regenerating the earth. That's the sort of top line goal that we have. So the outcome is a planet positive economy built on a regenerative financial system, and Toucan provides one of the earliest building blocks for creating that regenerative financial system. Great. I think that's time. I imagine we're probably about at 20 or 25 minutes. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for listening, and I would love for us to shift to questions. I know I saw a couple pop up in the chat. And we've got a few here. Okay, so which wallet can we map to get carbon tokens? So as a project building on an EVM compatible blockchain, which is Polygon, any EVM compatible wallet you can configure to hold carbon tokens. So that means you can use MetaMask, you could use Coinbase wallet. There's several, you could use Status. I think Zerion has a wallet coming out soon, maybe. So all of this, you can hold in any Ethereum account. Interacting with Toucan does require you to use MetaMask because that has the best support for interacting with decentralized applications. Okay, hi John, this is from Junji. Is Toucan working to define standards with the industry across several registries? Have you participated in initiatives such as Task Force and Scaling Voluntary Carbon Markets? And regarding credits that were already tokenized in other places, will you accept them into pools, or do the tokens on the pools need to be generated by Toucan? Great questions. So are we working to define standards? Yes. We are working to define standards. To this point, we've been mostly working on the blockchain-based side of the equation. So we opened up the TCO2 code base so anybody can look at it. We have been engaging with various industry players from across the ecosystem. We've been speaking with several standards bodies. We've been speaking with carbon brokers. We've been speaking with projects, project originators, project financing people, just to make sure that we are building with our community and making sure that we understand their needs. I think, yes, we are starting to work with the registries to figure out how they can most capably interoperate or integrate with tokenized carbon based on blockchains. And we've been really excited by how essentially how positive and forward-thinking they are. I think there's quite a lot of risk intrinsic to building with any new technology. And so, of course, these are risks we've been taking into account from day one, really trying to think through how do we manage technical risk, making sure we really think through the technical aspects of our system as we're building it, making sure we got audits performed by top auditing companies that can review our code with an independent eye and see if there are any places where there were issues that might arise, and so forth. But we also, there are other types of challenges here. We need to consider the legal implications of what we're doing. What is the status of a tokenized carbon credit? How do we make sure that users are protected? How do we make sure that appropriate identity checks are being taken into account at the right places of the system, while also making sure that the markets are opened up to as many people as possible? And all of these are things we've taken into account, and we're also working through with these representatives that we're just talking with from a range of industry bodies. So yes, in a word, yes, we are working to define the standards and to make sure that this is done in a way that manages risk while also is moving carbon markets forward, so we can scale these in a short amount of time, and therefore obviously drive more financing to projects on the ground. Regarding credits that were already tokenized on other places, will you accept them in pools? This is a really important question, and it's a really good question. So the essence of this is carbon tokens are essentially created by tokenizing carbon credit from an off-chain source and bringing it onto a blockchain. But who does that tokenization is an open question, right? There are others that are working on coming online soon that will perform a similar function as the Toucan Carbon Bridge. And it's our belief that one of the main value propositions of bringing carbon markets onto blockchains is that they're interoperable with each other, right? That we kind of reduce this market fragmentation problem by bringing them all into one financial environment, essentially, where they can interoperate. And so in that regard, yes, it's quite important to us that the interoperability is preserved. And we do feel like we haven't actually had to make the final answer to that question. So it may end up being a case-by-case basis if we feel like a project doesn't have adequate kind of integrity and security checks in place, and that there's risk of double issuance. We may not accept them into Toucan pools, but if they adhere to a credible process for tokenizing carbon credits, then I think we will want to accept them into Toucan's carbon pools. Great. From Christian, how do you prevent the destruction of value by pooling? The price of any token in the pool will always be equal to the value of the lowest value token in the pool. This is another great question, Christian. So you're driving at a bit more of a sophisticated aspect of the Toucan's carbon pool modules. So exactly, as you identify, in this pool, there's going to be carbon tokens from a spectrum of kind of attribute sets and quality levels, right? Value levels. There might be one token in the pool that can be bought and sold on the market for $10 and another token that can be bought and sold for $5, but both of those back the same fungible token, you know, and say a BCT, and BCT is trading for however much. The short answer is that when a carbon reference token like BCT or NCT is redeemed, you receive back a carbon token. But then the question becomes, which carbon token do I get, right? And we apply a fee at that point if people want to choose which carbon token they redeem. So if you wanted to redeem BCT and receive the default carbon tokens in the pool, which are going to be the lowest value tokens in the pool, the oldest tokens, that is going to be free. There's no fee to redeem BCT and pull out the carbon tokens, because that's a step that's required to perform the retirement. You can't actually retire the carbon reference tokens. You can only require the TCO2 tokens that are held in the pool. We don't want to put barriers in the way of people retiring carbon credits, right? So the default redemption process, there is no fee applied, but if you redeem the higher quality tokens in the pool, if you want to selectively redeem or choose which carbon tokens you receive as the outcome of this redemption event, then there's a fee applied. At the moment, this is a flat fee. It's different for each pool, but there's like a flat fee for any token. We're exploring ways to build a more nuanced kind of pricing system into our redemption process. It's tricky because one of the problems we're trying to solve is that there's not really a fair, transparent price that is kind of market wide for these individual carbon tokens of different projects and vintages. So it's hard to figure out exactly what what the fee should be applied to selectively redeem this token versus that token. But that's something that we're working on. Yeah, I think that's a great question. So yeah, the short answer is any token can go in, but in order to get whatever token you want out, there's a fee applied. And I'll also mention, as an example of what we mean when we say embedding climate action into the fabric of our financial system by default, if you do this selective redemption process, the fees that we take, a portion of that goes as revenue to the Toucan Protocol so we can sustain our operations and continue to grow the system. But another large portion of that, in fact, on the nature carbon pool, it's 50% of the fee, and on the base carbon pool, it's 80% of the fee, is actually used just to retire tokens held in the carbon pool. So 5%, if you selectively redeem from the base carbon pool, there's a 10% fee applied. If you redeem 100 BCT, you get back 90 TCO2 tokens that you get to choose. But of the 10% that are taken as a fee, 5 of those tokens are just retired from the lowest quality tokens in the pool, and 5% go to Toucan as revenue. Great. Okay, let's move forward to Junji. How you envision other dimensions of projects that generate carbon credits, such as social benefits? Absolutely. Co-benefits are included in our standard attribute taxonomy. So we have tagged these credits, carbon credit contracts, with those specific attributes, including the co-benefits. And that's important because that plays a big role in what the value of those credits are on the market. So we want to make sure that that's visible to people that are buying carbon tokens on chain, whether that's visible to them if they're manually buying and it kind of examining it in some kind of visualization, maybe a dashboard or some kind of, registry where they can go select which tokens they want to buy. But it's also accessible to be read by the smart contracts, like a machine readable form of that information is also accessible. So we could use co-benefits as a gating filter in a carbon pool if we want to. We could create a carbon pool that only accepts, credits from that possess a particular co-benefit. All right, Christian. So what incentive is there for the originator? This is also a great question, and it's one the short answer is we're working on this. At the moment, Toucan plugs in with the existing carbon market. So we kind of inherit all of the dynamics of the existing carbon market as is. And the truth is, at the moment, old carbon credits on the market, the originator doesn't really have anything to do with them anymore, right? They were financed and typically sold long ago, and there are the project financiers or brokers that now hold the credits from 2012, 2015, 2008, whatever it may be. Those are the main people that are currently interacting with Toucan Protocol. We're very actively exploring how we can use the infrastructure for what it's meant to be used for, which is getting more money into the hands of the originators, right? So that's a short answer. What incentive is there for the originator? It is possible that the originator now has markets that they can sell directly into without necessarily needing to sell to a buyer. If they brought online a carbon credit that matched the criteria of a particular carbon pool, they could issue their carbon credits, bridge them onto Toucan, and sell them on our liquid markets, on the liquid markets running on blockchains, and basically kind of cash out on day one without needing to rely on anybody else. So that's one of those ways in which Toucan helps kind of minimize counterparty risk. But yeah, it's a great question. There are some very exciting things happening in the blockchain world around, especially actually in the NFT space, of how do we make sure that some royalties flow back to the artist for every kind of subsequent sale and so forth. And that's something we're thinking about. There's, as you might imagine, there's quite a lot of complexities in building this kind of system so that it can operate at scale, and explaining, it's one thing to experiment and build a prototype, and it's another thing to build a production scalable market kind of functionality. And so we're essentially in the R&D phase with some of those ideas of kind of creating a perpetual funding stream for originators and so forth. That wouldn't be happening anytime soon. Yeah, wow, these are great questions. I think that's it for the questions in the chat. So I'd be curious to come back and see who. Cool. Does anybody else? Sherwood.
Hey, yes, thanks, John. I really enjoyed this presentation, and congratulations on the success you had. It sounds like you've been there since the kind of very near beginning. And one of the things that the SIG is really kind of focused on is we're kind of like a sandbox, and we want to kind of develop proof of concept and kind of move concepts to kind of market and build buy-in, and kind of build networks. So I'm really curious to hear a little bit about not necessarily the origin story, but moving from kind of proof of concept to kind of getting buy-in in the marketplace and finding partnerships. What were some of kind of the key breakthroughs and kind of key partnerships that really kind of helps you move from an idea to kind of a thriving kind of community and ecosystem?
That's a great question. And it's, I have some answers that are informed by experience and some that are ongoing, right? This is an ongoing process. We're still so early days with this. So, I mean, essentially, Toucan is a system that allows you to tokenize real world assets, right? At the end of the day. And these real world assets are these carbon credits. And the question, of course, is cool, you build this great system, but like, why would I send my carbon credits and perform this ridiculous bridging procedure where I have to download new software and I have to make new accounts to get assets in? And it's the Web3 user experience is super trying and needs a lot of work. And the short answer is, with Toucan, we launched with a partner, a partner called KlimaDAO. And honestly, it was in large part because of the timing of the launch of Toucan that there was a real excitement within the crypto community of using these decentralized finance kind of techniques for driving climate action. And so KlimaDAO launched, and because of the configuration of the system, if anybody's familiar with KlimaDAO, is a fork of a project called Olympus DAO. And it was one of the most successful decentralized finance projects last year. They had this like really unbelievable rate of return for the system, and a lot of people actually ended up making a lot of money off of it, and it's since not been doing so well, to say the least. But at that particular moment in time, a lot of people were very excited about it, and that served as this like real strong demand signal to, well, not even demand signal, it was just demand on chain for people buying carbon credits from brokers in the legacy markets and kind of bridge. So that's one piece, is we built this infrastructure, and it wouldn't have done anything if it weren't for demand, for a reason to engage in this novel technology. So I think that's one lesson, and really important breakthrough, is make sure that the demand side really understands the value of what you're doing and why they should do something. And well, for better or worse, the short answer is to why they should do it is because they make money, So that's one piece. But now that we're actually kind of moved past the hazy days of 2021 and this crypto market cycle that seems to have maybe thankfully sort of calmed down a little bit, I think another really, really important piece is to really kind of delve deeply into the needs of the prospective users and understand, it's kind of a standard design thinking approach, but engaging with these stakeholders, engaging with these customers, and understanding what they need. So for example, recently I've been talking to a lot of people, and they've been getting really excited about the fact that with Toucan, it's very easy to do these fractionalized retirements where I'm offsetting a flight that I go on to Europe, and I at the end want to say tick the box and pay whatever it is, $1 or something, to offset my flight. But after that, I kind of just trust that like the offsetting takes place, and obviously if they didn't, then it would be fraud, but I don't necessarily get anything back for me ticking that box. I just pay an extra buck and feel okay about it. But if I were instead kind of immediately shown a dashboard, say, where there was a specific retirement that was performed in my name or with some message that I posted in, and I could click through and independently verify this on the blockchain, that's a really compelling value proposition for a lot of these projects that are essentially like demand aggregators for offsetting, right? They allow people to kind of like pile on these offsets, and then once a month they'll say, okay, cool, our customers collectively offset 2,000 tons of carbon, so we're going to go perform one offset event manually in this legacy registry. If we can go and say, you can provide a much better customer experience by giving people proof that they've actually taken climate action at the outset, and B, you can automate this programmatically, and you don't need to have API. You have API access to the registry, right? Automatically. You don't need to go and sign up and get an account. You automatically have it. I think that's actually been quite an exciting line that we're exploring with a couple of different customers, this sort of automated micro retirements functionality. So that's, and I think that actually like to inspire people to make this switch, it means that ideally you have the ability to make their life much easier, the ability for them to make a much better product for their customers. And typically, honestly, early on, we need to be finding the the customers that are switched on about this stuff. There's this it's just a classic like early adopters, then the middle, and then the sort of laggards. We're looking for early adopters, right?
Yeah, basically you're saying build a product that people need and be at the right place at the right time.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah. So it's basically a same answer as USC with anybody. But I think a key piece there is, I mean, a lot of the legacy carbon markets people that I've been talking to, they understand the value of blockchain, right? They know the global settlement, they know reduced counterparty risk, they know no double spend, like they've done their research. And so a lot of it is also, and I'd be curious actually for your perspective from Hyperledger's point of view, when we're dealing with public blockchains, a lot of the hesitations are around a lot of the common conceptions about large energy usage. There's conceptions about it being open to scam and fraud. All these are legitimate concerns. And so that's another piece is like education and kind of like risk management dimension to it that maybe Hyperledger doesn't really have to worry about, because as an enterprise solution, it's, you kind of avoid a lot of that. I don't know.
Another question, but we're in the permission space, so a lot of those challenges we don't have to deal with.
Yeah, exactly.
They're tricky. Yeah,
they are tricky. Yeah, which I mean, there's a lot of benefits to permission. It reduces the complexity and risk by a lot. And then the flip side is it means that it's not quite as open to letting anybody come and build, which is, I think I really do. I have this really strong belief that like we're going to end up in a world where there's a place for public blockchains, there's a place for permission blockchains, and it's not going to be winner takes all. It's going to be both and letting a lot of this more experimental innovation happening in the public space. Once that's sort of tried and true and proven security, then shifting it on to the permission ledgers. And so I'm looking at the time. I see George has his hand up. I've got to jump off in a minute or two, unfortunately, because I've got another talk I've got to give. But George, hi.
Hi, thanks, John. Thanks for the great talk. I have a really quick question, actually. I mean, I think it should be a quick question. We're expecting a big change in the building regulations to require projects in the UK to certify their carbon footprint. But we're not quite sure how it's going to be monitored, realized, or if it's going to go into kind of a trading regime like it does in energy, and it looks like it's going to happen in transport as well. So we're getting geared up to try and understand how the cryptocurrency or the carbon currency, the sort that you've been talking about, might be useful for us or linked with us. I think we're looking for ideas or looking for, we don't quite know how the landscape is going to frame up, but we have an inkling.
Yeah. Well, so I'm not super familiar with that particular regulatory development. I think generally you got two pieces to some carbon accounting, right? There's the estimate, and then there's the retirement, the sort of balancing using offsetting. And Toucan, we are purely focused on creating more sophisticated functionality on the offsetting side of the equation. So we're really interested in understanding the state of the art of carbon accounting and estimation methodologies. Most of the people that come to talk to us say, we want to be carbon neutral. And we say, well, what's your carbon footprint? And they say, we don't know, help us figure it out. And that's not the role we necessarily want to play, because that might undermine our neutrality. At the same time, we want to encourage people to
send them to us, because that's what we're spending all our time doing, is figuring out how to do carbon estimates for building projects.
But then on the flip side of this, on the offsetting side, once you have that number, say, okay, 10 tons this month, I don't know. Toucan, as I said, allows for this like individual retirements to be very, very easily performed, and essentially to produce a verifiable evidence that a retirement took place to match with an estimation and essentially prove that you have a balanced carbon budget. So I think that's one dimension, that these blockchain-based systems that allow for a more sophisticated carbon market and sophisticated retirement functionality do have a really strong role to play in helping essentially with like carbon auditing, right? I make this claim, but can I prove it? Can I show that I actually made this retirement? And is it a bit more advanced than just I got an email from somebody that said that I did this, you know? Cool. I know we've got some questions in the chat. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get to them all, but hey, Robin.
Hey, John.
Thanks, John. That was great.
Yeah, maybe if you want people to give the chance to reach out to you after the talk,
yes.
How can they reach out to you?
Absolutely, yeah. So on email, I'm john@toucan.earth. And then I'm also on Twitter at johnx25bd. That's my sort of username across the internet. So if you want to get in touch with me on Twitter, my DMs are open, or on LinkedIn, actually, that's also my, I'll just go ahead and drop my LinkedIn profile as well in here now, and LinkedIn. And then I'm afraid I would love to hang out, but I do have to run. So I'm just going to drop this here. And then
John, thank you very much for joining today and for giving the great presentation. And I really like the holistic view that you presented at the beginning, and but starting with a particular part rather than trying to solve all the problems at once. And thanks for your work at Toucan and for making the time today.
Brilliant. Thanks, Robin. Thanks, everyone. So nice to meet you all. Yeah, hope to see you out there, and send any questions or keep the conversation going online. Yeah.
Thanks, John. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.